didn't need any. You can get by without electricity, so it was okay.
Was it an organized ride?
No, just me and a couple of my friends. I have a friend that I used to live up in Canby, up by Portland, when I lived up there before I moved back to Eugene, and he moved back to Colorado. He's from Colorado, and so he usually comes out once a year to visit, and we try to organize a ride when he comes out sometimes.
Fun.
We may want to correct that a little. It was organized by Scott and his buddies. It wasn't disorganized.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it wasn't like a group ride, but they're still riding. They're still heading down to San Francisco. They'll be there by Saturday in San Francisco.
Well, that's fun.
We met a couple at one of the camps. We met a couple that's from France. You know, cycling the Oregon coast is world class, world renowned, and there was a young couple that from France that they're from a tiny village in the Alps, and they started up in Alaska, and they're going to ride their bicycles all the way to Argentina.
Wow.
Wow.
Take a year to do it. So they're already several months into it, and started up in Alaska, and they rode all the way down from there, and they're going to go all the way to Argentina. Pretty impressive.
Takes a lot of visas to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
So looks like we've reached our quorum of at least 20 people. And tonight, Scott is going to be talking about cancer. It's an important topic, and I think we see a few new faces, and or at least names that I am not familiar with. I don't remember everybody, but if someone is new, maybe you could just unmute briefly and then tell us how you found out about the class. And it looks like Manette or Monet. Welcome, and how did you find out about the classes?
Hi, I'm Monet. I met you guys at the picnic potluck a couple months ago.
Oh, well, welcome.
And I finally dug the card out and followed up.
Yeah, well, that's why we do these every single week, because, we plant a little seed like, hey, come to class, but, a number of people, it could take weeks, it could take months, maybe for some people a few years. But for the people who hop on eventually, usually they tell us they have some benefit. And just want to share with you why I do this. And I think Scott does it for a similar reason, but I've been a physician for almost 47 years. And I had a few people tell me that they appreciated what I was doing to help them out over those years, but never did I get as many of these. You can see what these are. These are cards and letters. And then there's a whole bunch of emails that I have gotten in just the last 10 years since I've been teaching these classes, from people whose lives have literally been changed because they've been able to get off of their medicines, they're feeling better. And these are the people and the reason why I continue to do these classes, not only to get more of these, but to continue to support those who have actually made the transition. And that's how we're going to change the practice of medicine, and that's how we're going to change the world. So with that said, welcome, Monet. And then there's someone else who might be new. Okay, Charlotte.
Hi there, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm Charlotte, and I've come to you in several ways. I guess first and foremost through Nikki Frank, who's a friend of mine, and then I met Scott at some sort of wellness something or other over at the fairgrounds, which is quite close to where I live, and So have intended to join for a while, and so cancer is a important topic, as you said, Charlie, and I've been working with Thomas Borsch for the last almost, I guess, about 9 months or so, and prior to that, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I read Joel Furman's work, and so that's really influenced my shift in diet, and then having Thomas help customize that has been wonderful.
Well,
Great.
that is great. Welcome to you, and
Thank you.
both Scott and I are happy to have you.
And we're gonna have a
And,
booth.
I spend way too much time on Zoom, so excuse me for coming off video.
That's okay.
And we'll be at our Eugene plant-based providers will be at the Eugene Health and Wellness Expo this coming October as well. So just a shout out for anyone that wants to come see us at the booth. We'll be there again this year.
Any other new attendees that you care to share? Jeannie?
Yes, I met you, Dr. Ross, when you came to the potluck in Sutherland. I started whole food plant-based January of last year. And I had a brother I lost a few years ago to colon, sorry, colon cancer. So the topic, plus setting the alarm on my phone to remind me that the Zoom meeting starts at 7. There's been a few other topics since you've been to the potluck that interest me, but like I said, I missed the 7 o'clock, so I would have to watch them later. But anyway, I'm glad I made it tonight. Thanks.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you, and we realize this is a timely topic for many, and it's also a very emotion-producing, topic. In your case, we're trying to spread the information so that less people have to suffer in a similar way, and we're going to keep sharing this information for that reason. So thank you for coming. Let me go back to the gallery and see if there is anybody else who cares to unmute and say hello.
Hello.
Okay, Kevin. So Kevin's a 4th year medical student who's rotating with me, just started yesterday. He's from Western University of Health Sciences, the medical school in Lebanon that I've mentioned a number of times. And Kevin, maybe you could kind of tell the people how you got on the track and what you've been doing with your life, and they can understand the importance of doing this.
Well, I got into health kind of unintentionally, living a very unhealthy lifestyle, eating this and growing up on the standard American fare of everything under the sun, including a bunch of dairy and meat products. Had no consideration about it, and then discovered I would be a father at a fairly young age of 21, and innocently just wanted to do well for my son. And lo and behold, discovered a diet that implicated myself in that, needing to make changes as well. So I can appreciate the many struggles people go through making dietary switches, giving foods up, as it seemed at the time. But since then, I've gone from being out of shape to feeling fantastic regularly, having reliable, great fitness. I'm like Scott in some ways. I like the ultra endurance events, so I run and do 50-mile races, and get to enjoy children who are reliably healthy as well. And having grown up in a family and having watched disease take its share of family members and watching them go out in parts, as it were, following the American, standard practice of paying no attention to your diet at all or your lifestyle choices and going through the medical gamut, diabetes and cancer. I wanted to do something different than that and contribute to something different than that, and worked as a health consultant for about 10 years before going to medical school, realizing that really just needs to happen systemically within the healthcare system. And it's great to see, practitioners like Scott and Charlie out here doing that. So in my medical school training, there's a massive hole that is called lifestyle medicine and nutrition. We get taught 0 hours of it. I did know that coming in. It was a little disappointing to have it confirmed, but there's great practitioners out there getting great results. And I think if we start focusing on those great results, a lot more people get to benefit from it. The students and then future doctors get to benefit from actually having patients get better. And overall, we're going to have a much healthier, population and healthcare practice as well. So.
Well said.
So, do you think I'm gonna have fun with this med student?
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to have him rotate with me. And so, yeah, we are gonna have fun. And it's not just one med student that's been here, but we have our, I don't know what to call her. She is a magician in many ways. She is just like, she has done so much for the classes, the community, with other book club and starting a Facebook page and those other things, doing counseling. But it's not just Lisa, who I'm going to introduce next. It's also going to be the newest on the block, and that's Kim Nguyen. And so first, Lisa, maybe you could share a few words for those new people who are here. And we really have been so inspired by your efforts over the last couple of years.
Everyone, it's so good to be back. I just finished my surgery rotation, so I've missed the classes here, and it's nice to see everyone again. And it also means that I get to start doing the health coaching again. So I'm updating the Calendly link that Scott sends out in the newsletters. So there's a lot of availability for the next few months, actually. So if you're looking for more one-on-one help with whether it's nutrition, exercise, sleep, and whether it's information, recipes, or motivation, I would be so happy to talk with you and get to know your situation. And then we have our book club, actually a day after tomorrow, so this Thursday, for How Not to Die, the second time that we're going to be meeting to discuss that book. And then we'll still have one more meeting in September after that to finish it up. And then, of course, the Facebook group is always available to you as another resource. So thank you all for participating in all of these things and letting me be a part of it too.
Thank you for all you're doing, Lisa. And Scott, am I thrilled or what about all these medical students who are here? It's been one of my dreams to have not only the older people like myself, you were the younger generation that have been doing this together, but now we have an even younger generation who's going at it. And the newest in the group is Kim Nguyen. Maybe you could say hello, Kim.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you again and nice to meet the new people attending the meeting today. My name is Kim. A lot of my background, my undergrad degree, my master's degree, it's in nutrition, and it's definitely motivated me to pursue medicine. So I'm a medical student now, and I really hope to incorporate that knowledge of medical nutrition therapy, nutrition counseling, just so that people could live healthy and happy lives, and for that to carry on through childhood to adulthood. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try and help. Hopefully, I can support you throughout this journey. Yeah, it's so nice to be here.
Thank you, and we're happy to have you. And there might be a couple new people who haven't spoken up, who we're now up to 34 people. We started with a little over 20. Is there anybody who's new to the class who wants to say hello and how you found out about these classes? It's good to be Delilah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Delilah. I just started. I think this is the first time I've come to a class. I think I found you guys at some type of health fair, maybe.
Uh-huh.
And I keep getting the emails, and I was like, I'm going to log in tonight. And I'm very interested in the mission, and I am excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, welcome. Are you surprised by the younger people, the med students who are here?
Not necessarily. I think that things are kind of going that direction, it seems like. But I listen to a lot of podcasts and do a lot of this stuff, so maybe I'm just in my bubble. But no, not really.
Okay.
But happy about it.
We are too. All right. I know, Scott, you got a lot to go over, and I got we'll see if there is one more or anybody else who wants to say hello who hasn't yet. Anyway, welcome, Delilah. We're happy to have you. I don't see anything else, and I have 2 pages to look at. So I've looked at my couple pages, and okay. So it sounds like we are kind of introduced to each other now, and Scott's going to go ahead and do his thing on cancer and whatever else he has to say.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and can see my screen, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, let me get this. I just figured since we have some new people, introduce everyone to the Live Lifestyle Medicine website, livelifestylemedicine.com. And you could subscribe to the weekly class newsletter. I'd highly encourage people to do that, because that's where there's the link, like Lisa talked about, the link to her one-on-one health coaching. There's also the information about the book club, all that's there. The Facebook group, which Facebook group is also here on the homepage. But so yeah, between the newsletter and the website, you'll be pretty squared away. So if you're new to the website, I'd recommend you scroll about halfway down here to the website tutorial and click on this. It's a recording. It's about 20 minutes of me giving a tour of the website, so you kind of know what all the resources are on the website. So I just wanted to kind of mention that between the website and subscribing to the class newsletter. And be sure, a lot of times people will subscribe to the newsletter and they'll get the welcome newsletter, but then you'll also get a newsletter every Sunday morning, and sometimes it'll go to your junk file. So if you don't get that newsletter every Sunday morning, remember to check your spam folder or your junk file. I always want to emphasize that. All right, let me close this. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. So tonight, going to talk about cancer, and as well as next week. So tonight's kind of more, I'm going to kind of go over cancer, give you some education about cancer and how it works in general. And then the last couple slides, you'll see some, how food relates to the superfoods that fight against cancer. So kind of we'll just kind of give you, this is a good background on cancer and how things work. And then next week, Charlie will be showing kind of more details about more details about the foods that fight cancer, and more about diet and lifestyle related to cancer. Whereas tonight's more of a background, deeper dive into cancer itself. So just to kind of give you a teaser about next week. Start with a couple of quotes here. People do not decide their futures, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. We have a whole class earlier this year on food addiction and behavior change, and we talk a bit about habits in that class. So you can go back to the class archives and watch that if you're interested. And then kind of going to what Kevin was saying and some of the other medical students, people are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and are treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. So that's a real frustrating truth about our healthcare system, unfortunately. We're trying to change that, though, and we are changing that. Let's start out with some statistics here. I actually tried to, I went onto the CDC and I didn't see any updated stats. This was the same stats I presented last year from 2020. I didn't see anything new from the CDC to update it, but just to kind of review if you weren't at this class last year, 602,350 deaths in the United States from cancer, which is the number 2 cause of death. Heart disease is number 1 at 659,000, which is why we had a whole class on heart disease. So cancer is 22% of all deaths in this country, heart disease 23%. So just those top 2 killers is nearly half of all the deaths in the United States. So 45% just from those top 2, which is why we spend so much time talking about these 2. So we're going to start off. I'm going to try not to get too complicated here for you, but just want to give you a background of the kind of the 3 stages of cancer: initiation, promotion, and progression. And at the end of this is a pretty short presentation, so we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end. But so initiation is what's called genetic alteration or mutation. And so what the best way to kind of describe what initiation is, we've all grown up hearing about all the different carcinogens out there, right? So like asbestos and red dye number 42 and plutonium and all the different carcinogens. Seems like everything on the news throughout our lives is like, oh, this causes cancer, this is carcinogenic, all these different things. And processed meat is actually one. Processed meat became a class 1 carcinogen as well, which is the same as asbestos and plutonium. So what that is just, okay, so something causes cancer. What we're really talking about is basically it comes in, the carcinogen comes in and alters our DNA. So every cell in our body has DNA. It's kind of like the piano keys on a piano. And so the basically more complicated aspect of it is it comes in and it methylates the DNA. You don't have to worry about what that means, but it just basically causes a mutation and alters that cell, and then that cell turns into a cancer cell. So that's all the initiation is. It's just that something comes in, alters the DNA, and then that cell that was once a cell in your pancreas, or a cell in your colon, or a cell in your breast, or a cell in your prostate, other parts of the body, it suddenly becomes no longer is programmed to be a colon cell or a pancreas cell. Now it's a cancer cell in that location. So that's what an initiation is. And most of the time, we're getting bombarded by carcinogens all of the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so luckily we have an immune system, and our immune system, for the most part, will correct all those mutations. So it'll mess it up, and then our immune system comes in and it fixes it. So obviously that, most of us don't die from cancer. And so we have an immune system that helps to correct this error. And so what promotion then is an expression of the genome, which then, so once it's become a cancer cell, and now it starts to replicate. So it's the expression of the genome. So the genes have been changed, and now it's cancer. And so you have the initiation. Now promotion is actually expression of that mutation. So the mutation has now become, okay, it's a cancer cell, and now it's starting to replicate. And again, we've learned a lot about this portion of cancer just in the last few years. And we used to think that, oh, it's all in the genes. You're programmed to get cancer, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's epigenetics, and what your genes that you were born with, and there's nothing that can be done. And we've learned that that's actually not true. That's only true in about 10 to 15% of the cases. What actually happens most frequently is we have these genes that can get turned on, and they can also get turned back off again. And some of the and I guess before I tell you kind of some of the specifics of that, is that there's actually 2 kinds of genes. This is a good way to think about it. There's 2 kinds of genes. So we have genes that are dictator genes, which are kind of like, think about when you're born, you have a certain eye color, you have a certain hair color. There's nothing you can do about those, right? So those are like dictator. That's a strong word. Dictator genes. There's nothing you can do about it. Eye color, hair color. It's set in stone. But there's other types of genes we have in our body that are basically like, the best way to describe it is like it's a committee. So a committee sits down and says, well, how should we let this gene be expressed? How is this going to be expressed? They can be influenced. Committees can be influenced. And so this is a good way to describe how a lot of the vast majority of cancer genes are. You know, probably 80 to 90% of the cancer genes are these committees. And this is good news because then we have an opportunity to have our immune system help, and to have, you know, our diet and our lifestyle might play a role, things like that, to determine what genes get expressed. And so this is really good news. And now into the more recent data that we have. One example I like to give is, a lot of you have probably heard of Dr. Dean Ornish, who Dean Ornish back in 1990 showed you could reverse heart disease in patients with diet and lifestyle, you know, with the whole food plant-based diet and exercise and meditation and social support, you know, healthy lifestyle. And he actually showed, he did work with Dr. Craig Venter. Craig Venter was one of the scientists that mapped the human genome. So he's very high status in that field. And so Craig Venter worked with Dean Ornish on a study, and what he did was a randomized controlled trial on patients with early stage prostate cancer. And so he had a control group, just typical, they didn't change anything, they were the control. And then he had a group of people that did the diet and lifestyle change. And what they found were there were over 500 genes, they call them oncogenes, which are basically cancer causing genes. Onco means cancer. And there was over 500 genes that were influenced. And they have these gene maps, and they showed that the people that did the diet and lifestyle change, they actually, there's tumor promoter genes and tumor suppressor genes. So think about, you know, cancerous tumor, you want a tumor suppressor gene, and you want more tumor suppressor genes, and you want less tumor promoter genes, because tumor promoter means it promotes the growth of tumors. And so what the control group, or the intervention group, showed with over 500 genes was that the diet and lifestyle changes, it actually turned up tumor suppressor genes and turned down tumor promoter genes. So they actually, for the first time ever, had a map showing that what the lifestyle change did for cancer. And so it showed that they could reverse early stage prostate cancer in those patients. And those tumor promoter genes are also involved in cancers like breast cancer and colon cancer, as well as the prostate cancer. So this is great news. So that's kind of a good example of what promotion means. So we got the carcinogen, which initiates it, the promotion with the genes exhibiting the cancer, basically turning normal cells into cancer, and that starts to replicate. And then progression is pretty simple. It's just malignant growth, cancerous growth. And so you think about going from 2 cells to 4 cells to 8 cells to 16 cells to 32 cells, 64 cells. It starts to grow. And there's other factors we'll talk about here today a little bit, but more so with Charlie next week too, is you'll see a lot of the things that influence cancerous tumor growth. And we have a lot of control over that as well. And I'll just give you a couple of quick things here now. And so think about how if a cancerous tumor is getting bigger and bigger, it needs a blood supply, right? So if a tumor mass is needs to keep growing, it needs to have a blood supply to keep itself with nutrients, so it can keep growing. And that's something called angiogenesis. So angiogenesis means the growth of blood vessels. And so what a lot of these foods that we'll be talking about, whole plant foods, it actually suppresses angiogenesis, which is a good thing. We don't want that tumor to have a blood supply. So that's one thing. And then you've heard, if you've been to some of these classes, you've heard Charlie and I talk a lot about how animal products, so meat and dairy products, have a lot of a hormone called insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. And what insulin-like growth factor 1 is that it causes more growth. Things that have high metabolic rate, like cancerous tumors, that causes them to grow really fast. And so essentially eating meat and dairy, the animal protein and the IGF-1 actually is like throwing gasoline on the fire. So if you have a cancerous tumor growing, the more meat and dairy you eat, the more IGF-1 you have, and then the faster the tumors would grow. And so those are just a couple of examples of things that influence progression of cancer. So any questions about the 3 stages? I didn't want to spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to give you a background of that. So any questions about those 3 stages at this point?
I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay. So this is a good summary of kind of what we talked about. So genes load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. That's a good way to think about it. So you have the potential there, but there's with the genes that we're born with, the epigenetic factors, which I won't get into in depth with right now, but you saw with the example with Dr. Ornish and Craig Venter, how they that gun is loaded, but the lifestyle can either pull the trigger or it can put the safety on, so to speak. Because if you can turn off the genes that promote cancer, then that's good. So the lifestyle can actually do that, can affect the genes. So it's really hopefully hopeful and promising news. So now I want to show you a video. This is from Dr. John McDougall. And this is just an example of how cancer grows and how it works, kind of figuring out. And I kind of want you to be able to take away from this video that cancer develops over a long period of time. And so it's good. That's also good news, because we have time to try to, well, not only to prevent cancer, but to slow the growth of maybe a cancer that's already growing in us. And it can be a long time before it's detected, because a lot of the medical field is all focused on early detection and screening. And not that that's a bad thing, it's just that that's kind of like too late in a lot of cases. And so we really should be focusing on prevention, because that's where the biggest bang for the buck is. But with our lifestyle and everything else, the focus in the medical field is so much on earlier detection, and which again is a good thing, but it's kind of still missing the point. The point is to try to prevent cancer and maybe even reverse it. And we know that at least in 40 to 50% of cases, we can often prevent it or reverse it. There's certain kinds of cancers, blood cancers, childhood cancers, some types of cancer that maybe we don't know, we don't have enough data to say that diet and lifestyle make a huge difference in. But in the ones that are the most common, the ones like colon cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, those really respond well to diet and lifestyle changes. But I wanted to kind of take away from this video about how long of a process it is, and that hopefully give you hope that it's something we can at any time we can influence. And so this is actually he's talking about the cancer he's talking about here. I don't know if most of you know who Steve Jobs was. So Steve Jobs was the inventor of Apple, and so he actually died of pancreatic cancer. And so he's going to, when he talks about the cancer here, he's going to be talking about Steve Jobs. So I'm going to start playing it, but then I'm going to pause it because there's a couple of grammatical errors that Dr. McDougall says at the beginning I want to correct. So I'll start playing it and then I'll pause it.
Here's the tumor that was found. I don't know what size it was. It was just reported as being found on a CAT scan. The smallest tumor you can find on a CAT scan is about 2 centimeters in size.
Okay, so when he says centimeters, he means centimeters. And so I didn't want you to be confused, because I know I was confused the first time I watched this. So when he says centimeter, that's the same thing as centimeter. And then when he's talking about the little dot on the left there, he means to say 2 millimeters. And he says 2 centimeters, but he meant 2 millimeters. So the dot on the left is a cancer tumor, and it's only supposed to be 2 millimeters in size, which is half the size of a BB. That's 2 million cells, and that's about the smallest you can ever see on a CAT scan. So I just wanted to, so I'll play it out now, but so now that you have that, kind of have that straight.
Which is about twice the size of a BB. About half the size of a BB, about twice the size of a period on a paper. Just very tiny, but that would be hard to see even with a CAT scan. If you saw a tumor on a CAT scan of the pancreas, you generally expect it to be about 1 centimeter in size, which is about 1/2 inch. And likely it was even bigger than that. I don't know. I don't have his medical records. But I think it's fair to assume the tumor that they found on this CAT scan, on this X-ray, was at least a ½ inch in size. We know that when people have cancer, this is all kinds of cancers, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, et cetera, that people die when their individual tumors get to about 10 centimeters or about 4 inches in diameter. So when you get to that tumor mass in the body, that's the end of life. Now, the way you get from the first cancer cell, always one cancer cell leads the way. What happens is things from the environment, like environmental chemicals or the foods we eat or cigarette smoke, things from the environment attack our cells. And when they attack the cells very badly, they usually kill the cells, but sometimes they attack the cells badly enough not to kill them, but badly enough to cause them to start dividing at their own free will. And that's one of the initial steps and characteristics of cancer. Cells in general have to live in a very neighborly manner. One cell that lives next to the other can't divide its own free will. If it did, if cells divided at their own free will, you'd be a misshapen mass in a matter of a few hours. Instead, cells have rules, and one of those rules is you don't divide. Well, there are a couple of exceptions, like if you're a child growing, you get signals from your brain that says, okay, you can divide, you can grow into a bigger person. Or if, say, you damage yourself, say you cut your skin, then the cells next to that wound can divide. It's part of the rules, part of the survival mechanism of the body. They can divide and repair that wound. Otherwise, cells aren't allowed to divide. Well, what happens in cancer, be it in the breast or the colon or the prostate or the pancreas, is cells get injured and they stop being neighborly and they start dividing at their own free will. And so here you have the first cell, and let's just go to job of pancreatic cancer, the first cell that becomes cancerous. And it starts dividing with free will. It turns into 2 cells. And there's a time interval here. It's called the doubling time, how much time it takes to go from 1 cell to 2 cells, and then 2 cells to 4, and then 4 to 8, and 16, and 32, and so on, until you develop a large tumor mass. When a tumor mass is 1 millimeter in size, it contains 1 million cells. When it's a centimeter in size, which is a ½ an inch, that tumor mass is 1 billion cells. All right, so what we know is at age 48, when he had that CAT scan and the subsequent needle biopsy of the pancreas, which diagnosed him as having islet cell cancer, or non-endocrine cell cancer of the pancreas, he was 48 years old, and I think it's fair to assume that the tumor that they saw on that CAT scan was a centimeter in size. I'm being generous. Could have been a little bigger than that, but it was probably 1 centimeter in size. He was 48 years old, and he died at age 56, and we know the tumor mass, because that's how big it gets when people die. The tumor mass was now about 10 centimeters. The interval in time here between 48 and 56 is 8 years. So it took 8 years to double from 1 billion cells into a tumor mass that was big enough to kill him. 8 years. So what we need to find out is what the doubling intervals would be for a mass to grow from 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters. How fast would it have to double to make this kind of change in 8 years? And the way we figure this out is by very complicated mathematics, but they can be found, these mathematics, on a website where you just enter. You enter the time the tumor starts, the time the patient died, and what it does is it tells you how fast the tumor is doubling. And based on these kinds of calculations that any of you could do, if you go to the November 2011 newsletter, it'll show you where the site is, it'll show you where the numbers are that you enter. And what you figure out is that Steve Jobs' tumor doubled about every 10 months. So to go from 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters during an 8-year period of time, those tumors had to double every 10 months. Okay, you with me? All right, so we know that. His tumor was actually a very slow growing tumor. The average doubling times of tumors, say of the lung, of the breast, the colon, or the pancreas, the average doubling times are about every 3 to 9 months. His was every 10 months, so it was slow doubling. All right, so we went from 1 centimeter to 10 centimeter with a doubling time of 10 months. Every 10 months it doubled, took an 8-year period of time. From that, we can figure out when the cancer started, when that first cell that became cancerous, when was that? All right, so you've got the doubling time from 1 centimeter, that's found in the pancreas, to a tumor mass of 10 centimeters, which is how big the tumors are by the time a person dies. That took place in 8 years, means those doublings took place in every 10 months. All right, well, let's just go backwards. Let's go from 1 centimeter to the first cell at a doubling rate of every 10 months. So we can calculate how far back it was that that first cell became cancerous in the pancreas. All right, so we put our calculations back into this double time calculator. Now what we find is that to go from 1 centimeter to the first cell took 24 years. That means that Steve Jobs developed cancer of the pancreas when he was 24 years old. Okay, it's just simple math. And then it took him another 8 years before that tumor mass they found in the pancreas finally got big enough to kill him.
So I just wanted to, if there's any questions, but, I guess the takeaway again is from that was a 24-year period from the time first cancer cell was formed to the time it gets to 1 million cells where you can then finally start to see it on the CAT scan. And so that's why the earlier and earlier detection, even though it's important, it's even more important to make your changes in your diet and lifestyle now, because you can't depend on earlier detection and screening to save your life. That's the problem. The cancer mortality isn't really going down that much, and despite all our early screening, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But so any questions about that? Just kind of wanted to give you a kind of a overview of how cancer works, the stages, and then how it kind of progresses, the doubling times and stuff like that. Any questions about that?
I was wondering if surgery would stop or slow it down.
Well, if you have a tumor and you can take it out, the problem is many cancers have already spread by the time they're big enough to be seen and be cut out. And so there are tumors that don't spread, and if they get clear margins, like say a breast cancer tumor, we call it breast cancer in situ, which means it's just there and there's no, like all the lymph nodes all around it are clear, there was no spread, then you've essentially cured that cancer because it hasn't spread as far as you know, and you cut it out, so then that would remove the cancer. But that's very small amount of the time. Most of the time, then you end up, there's cancerous cells throughout the body, and even though they're not detectable in the lymph nodes, that they're still out there, and they could still be too small to see. And that's why prevention is so important, and that we do the diet and lifestyle changes, because we can't depend on screening and early detection to save us. So I mean, it does save lives. It just a lot less lives than we would hope.
Thank you.
A few questions for you, Scott. I'll run.
Thank you, Charlie. Scott, I have a question, and this is about the doubling time. Do you think that we can, by some intervention, reduce the doubling time? Or maybe I'm jumping the gun. Maybe you are going to talk about that later.
Well, we know that the things that factor into the doubling time, and that's like I was talking about earlier, the tumor needs a blood supply. There's things like IGF-1. So we have control over some of those things. So if we stop feeding IGF-1 to our body, and we are not getting too many, a lot of these tumors are also hormone driven. So they need excess estrogen, they need excess testosterone, and they feed off of that. So if we have the right amount of estrogen, the right amount of testosterone, the right amount of IGF-1, and we aren't stimulating angiogenesis, basically the blood supply to the tumors, those are things that could affect the doubling time if we slow the growth of it. And we have a really strong immune system and things like that, because a lot of cancer treatment these days is really focusing on immunotherapy, and it's basically just trying to jumpstart your immune system to fight the cancer, and that's kind of a cutting edge area of cancer right now, treatment.
So in that case, I'm sure Mr. Jobs had some treatment, and perhaps because of that treatment, maybe his doubling time was smaller than what was, larger than what was measured for the last 8 years, right?
Yeah, hard to say. Yeah, since we didn't
Yeah.
have medical records or anything, so yeah, it'd be hard to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Mary Ellen.
So Scott, how did this cancer actually kill Steve Jobs?
Well, so pretty much every cancer, as it gets that large, is taking up a lot of the nutrients. It's invading the organs and the surrounding tissues, and then having, you know, all of that. It's taking all the nutrients and calories and things like that. So it's, you know, probably, you know, some of the theories as to how he got pancreatic cancer is when he was 24. Yeah, he was working with a lot of chemicals, working in the computer industry, and so the family, a lot of it was from family. They said, yeah, he was around a lot of what are now known to be carcinogenic chemicals. And so maybe as a theory, that's maybe how he got the pancreatic cancer to begin with, but then, you know, see how long it took before it got to where it killed him. So, and pancreatic cancer is a really bad.
But how does cancer actually cause the death? I had one of my dearest friends died of colon cancer last summer, and
Yeah.
another friend died of liver cancer.
Yeah, usually it's just
But what actually causes it? The
Yeah.
death, not the cancer.
Yeah, no, I know the death is caused by think about all the different cancerous tumors. You know, there's a primary tumor, then there's all often metastases, which are tumors that are spread to the bones and the other organs. And so it's just invading in all the other organs and causing your body to shut down, causes your liver to shut down, causes your kidneys to shut down. And, you know, it's just a lot of stress on the body. It's stealing a lot of the nutrients. So it's invading the body and causing the body to kind of shut down. So that's what actually causes the death for the most part.
So your heart stops. That causes you to die.
Eventually your heart stops. Your kidneys aren't working anymore, your liver. So all the things that your organs do, your liver and your kidneys, that they shut down their function. And so, you know, like if your liver shuts down, your ammonia goes really high, and that's toxic. And your kidneys shut down and all the metabolite, like think about someone with kidney failure, if they don't get their dialysis, they'll die. And so it's kind of like that. It just shuts down all the organs and invades the whole body, and that's what causes your death.
Or your blood gets thicker and it clots, and then you can't circulate the blood around, so you die of no oxygen, a pulmonary embolism. You can have a stroke, you can have a heart attack, you can have a blood clot, you can have so many things. We don't know the actual cause of death unless you do an autopsy, whatever, or you figure it out clinically.
Basically, it's a parasite that steals all the good stuff in your body until your body can't handle it anymore.
That helps you to lose weight, and yeah, that's why you get thin and wasted, and it's like a parasite in a way. It's gobbling up the nutrients, but the actual cause of death doesn't need to wait until that stage. It could happen earlier on if your blood clots too quickly or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Ron, you have a second question?
Yeah, my question is about if you have skin cancer, does it work the same way or is it different than organ cancer?
Usually the skin cancer would spread. Usually the problems with pretty much almost all cancers is not the cancer itself in that one spot. It's the fact it tends to spread to the rest of the body.
Okay.
So it spreads to the brain, it spreads to the bones, and it compresses those areas and causes them to, you know, lose blood supply because of the compression forces of the growing mass.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, does cutting out a growth remove the cause of that growth?
Only if hasn't spread, which is very rare that it hasn't spread, and that's the problem. So it's sometimes it buys you time. So a lot of times with cancer treatment, they'll switch from a curative kind of focus to a palliative focus, and so that means just to try to relieve symptoms. So they know it's spread and they're not going to cure it. But they'll cut out the tumor, they'll do radiation, they'll even do chemo sometimes just to shrink the tumor size so that you'll have less pain and maybe it prolongs your life a little bit, things like that. So there's palliative and there's curative. It's just unfortunately, and I'm going to talk about the different types of cancer growth here on the next slide when you guys are ready.
And the other thing is in terms of if you remove that growth, does it remove the cause? It depends on what the cause was. If it was radiation, it knocked out a cell, it would affect that area. Then you have to decide, did it metastasize? Did it break off and spread to another area of a body? If it spread to the other area of a body, it didn't fix it. But there's more than one cause. There's, like someone's mentioned, heavy metals and pesticides, and there are just so many. The IGF-1 that Scott talked about, excess estrogen that can lead to promoting the onset of cancer. So a lot of unknowns. I'm going to let you go on, Scott.
Yeah. Right. So I want to give you what I call the farm story, because it kind of gives you categories of types of cancer growth. So we have, imagine your body is a farm, and you want to keep the animals on the farm. So if you can keep the animals on the farm, you live. If any of the animals get off the farm, then you die from cancer. So it's just kind of a way to kind of conceptualize the types of cancer growth. And so we have turtles, we have rabbits, and we have birds, all three of these on the farm. And so what turtles are slow growing tumors. So turtles, you would die from other causes. So the cancer would not have ever caused symptoms or problems the majority of the time. Now there's always exceptions, but the majority of the time, the cancer would have never caused symptoms or caused your death. And so a good example of this is a really mild, slow growing form of prostate cancer. So you might have heard from your doctor or other providers that, most men, this is true, most men die with prostate cancer than of prostate cancer. So 90% of men over 90 have prostate cancer, but most of them will die of something else. They won't die from the prostate cancer. So this is a good example of a turtle. So turtles, when you think about cancer screening, we don't really want to find turtles, because if you find a turtle and treat a turtle, that means that the patient was overdiagnosed and overtreated, because if the cancer would never have caused any symptoms or problems and you would have died from something else, then treating that person's cancer would be overtreatment. And you might actually get harmed by the treatment. Radiation, like Charlie said, radiation can cause cancer. Chemotherapy can cause cancer. In of itself, the treatment can cause problems. And so turtles are ones that we are trying to avoid picking up with screening and with treatment because of that harm. But the problem is you don't always know which animal you have. There's oftentimes never a way to know if you're a turtle or rabbit or a bird. But let's move on. So that's turtles. Rabbits are fast growing, so you die from the cancer. So rabbits are hard to keep on the farm because they're really fast, right? Cancer would have caused symptoms or problems without treatment the majority of the time. And so rabbits are the target of cancer screening and treatment, because if we don't pick it up early with screening and we don't treat it, it's going to cause the patient to die. And so the rabbits are what we want to pick up with screening and the ones we want to treat. And so and you know that, okay, this person would die if we don't do the treatment. And so that's really the focus. But unfortunately, there are turtles that kind of get in there, and that's a controversial topic. I won't go too in depth on that, but just so you understand, rabbits are what we're trying to treat and screen for when we do colonoscopies and mammograms and pap smears and PSA blood tests and things like that. We're trying to look for rabbits. And then we have birds. Birds are fast growing and spread. You're never going to keep a bird on the farm. And so the cancer will cause symptoms and death with or without treatment the majority of the time. And so this is a good example. I even use my own family. My nephew's wife, she had the BRCA gene she inherited the BRCA gene for breast cancer, and she was only in her 30s, and she did every cancer treatment possible, and she still died from breast cancer. And so, so in hindsight, she was a bird because she did every cancer treatment, everything that could be done, and she still died from the breast cancer. So cancer will cause symptoms of death with or without treatment. So of course we treat birds because sometimes you can cure, sometimes you can occasionally cure birds as well, but very rare, but more likely you're somewhere between a rabbit and a bird if you're treated and cured of your cancer. And so it's, of course, you don't necessarily know, it's, like I said, you don't always know if it's a rabbit or a bird or a turtle. Sometimes you have an idea if it's more of a turtle, but rabbits and birds, we definitely want to do everything we can from a treatment standpoint. Is what, and I would say, diet and lifestyle is just another adjunct. Doesn't mean so you still go to see your doctor and do the treatments that are recommended, but as another adjunct, you can work on diet and lifestyle because that's something you for sure can control the best that you can. So any questions about turtles, rabbits, and birds? I just wanted to have you have an understanding. Again, I think the take home is that there's no way to necessarily know which someone has. I mean, there are certain types of when they do genetic testing and they diagnose with a certain kind of cancer, they have an idea of how aggressive of a cancer it is, and so they tailor the treatment based on that. But it can be confusing sometimes, and there can be some overlap and some uncertainty with the types. But just kind of have an understanding of these, slow growing, fast growing, and really fast growing and spreading, and just so you have an idea of that in your mind. Okay, so I want to move on to
any questions in the chat.
Okay. So the other thing I think is important to discuss is you'll always hear about cancer survival, like this treatment. So when your doctor says, "Hey, I recommend this radiation, this chemotherapy, this immunotherapy," whatever they're recommending, usually when they give you the survival rates for that, what they're talking about is 5-year survival, and that's really important because what you really want to know is what's the overall death from cancer, what's the cancer mortality from with the treatment. That's the more important thing, because the problem with 5-year survival is nowadays, because of our improving technology and cancer diagnosis and screening, we're catching cancers earlier and earlier. And so the earlier you detect cancer, the better your 5-year survival will be, right? So that kind of makes sense, right? If you catch it earlier, then there's a higher likelihood you'll still be alive in 5 years, with or without treatment. Say if you found a turtle, the turtle is slow growing and wouldn't ever cause symptoms, but you caught it on a screening test, but your 5-year survival would probably be really good because you picked it up so early. And so that's really important because we call that lead time bias. And so the thing that's most important is there's no correlation between 5-year survival rates and cancer mortality. So cancer mortality means overall death from cancer. So that's what you really want to know is what's the chances of with this treatment I'll die from cancer at any time. And that data is a little bit harder to come by because they always discuss 5-year survival. And I think that, because again, sometimes the cancer treatment itself can cause another cancer. So you might have cured the cancer that the treatment was designed for, but then the chemo or the radiation cause another type of cancer because it's carcinogenic itself. And so those are important things to discuss with your doctor and your cancer doctor, because you want to know what's the overall mortality, what's the chances that I'll die from this cancer or not just what my 5-year survival is. So those are good discussions to have. And so what overdiagnosis means is kind of what I talked about earlier, is if you end up having a turtle the whole time, you never had any symptoms, you never would have died from cancer, then that's an overdiagnosis, overtreatment. So again, a good example of that is the prostate cancer, which is why doing PSAs is kind of a little more controversial now. Like someone that's already in their 70s or 80s, it's not recommended to get a PSA anymore because because it's not showing that it's going to prevent cancer death from prostate cancer, because of the chances that you have, that it's such a high chance of having a turtle that the PSA is more likely going to cause harm. Because if you suddenly have a bump up in your PSA and you're already like 80 years old or something, then the treatment for that prostate cancer causes harm, because you're incontinent and you're impotent, and you have a cancer diagnosis, maybe you went through radiation or even chemo or something like that, and that's causing harm when you wouldn't have ever died from the cancer at all. You would have died with the cancer, not of the cancer. So that's where some of the screenings kind of are a little more controversial. And when you look at different screening guidelines from the United States Preventative Services Task Force versus the Cochrane collaboration versus the Nordic Cochrane in the Nordic countries, and there's all these different cancer screening recommendations, and they differ quite a bit. There are certain ones that are not so controversial, like colonoscopy is not really controversial. Everyone should get the colonoscopy, and and we've saved a lot of lives with pap smears and checking for HPV and vaccinations. And so there's definitely a lot, because there's actually viruses that can cause cancer like HPV. And so there's been a lot of progress in cancer screening. And so, yeah, I don't want you to come away with thinking it's all bad. It's just, it's complicated, and we won't go into more depth on it at this time. But any questions about 5-year survival and cancer mortality?
Well, there's Samsung SM guest. Is that Marcia?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead, Marcia. What's your question?
Scott, I either didn't hear you or you didn't say, what is PSA?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, PSA is prostate specific antigen. So it's the prostate gland puts out this protein called prostate specific antigen. And so say you had your prostate removed because you had prostate cancer, they'll usually monitor your PSA to make sure it's undetectable. Because if it becomes detectable when you've already had your prostate removed, for example, that means there's prostate cancer cells likely growing somewhere in your body, because there shouldn't be any more PSA. And so that's what that is.
Yeah. My brother had that. After 5 years, they said he was clear, and then 2-3 later he got it again.
Yeah, so that's that 5-year survival thing. They usually say cured after 5 years, but then oftentimes it comes back because you never actually got rid of all the cancer cells, and that's where it can be frustrating. But that's where diet and lifestyle can come in, because maybe if you do the traditional care, but then you also add a whole food plant-based diet and healthy lifestyle, you'll see you'll have some power against it progressing and recurring.
Ah, okay.
And I forgot to mention on the books, when I showed you guys the website, if I have time, I can go back to the website. But on the book list, we have a couple of books there on the website for cancer. The two that I have up on the website are T. Colin Campbell's The China Studies, a really good one if you're interested in cancer, as well as a book about breast cancer. It's called Breasts, the Owner's Manual by Dr. Christy Funk. So and that's on the website too. And that's anyone that's interested in breast cancer or knows someone with breast cancer, highly recommend that book. So Christy Funk, she's a breast cancer surgeon down in Los Angeles. She's actually the breast surgeon that treated Angelina Jolie, the actress, as well as Sheryl Crow, the singer. And so she's a world-renowned breast cancer surgeon, but she's really in the know on diet and lifestyle and its effects on cancer. So those, and then T. Colin Campbell's book on the China study was really focused a lot on cancer and the effects of animal protein on cancer and all that. So those two books are up on the website under the book section. So I recommend.
What is the last name? Christy what?
Funk, F-U-N-K.
Oh yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's show a couple of Dr. Greger videos. That's all I have left, and we'll have plenty of time for discussion and questions.
The most extensive report on diet and cancer in history is constantly being updated with all the new research. In their update on colorectal cancer a few years ago, they implicated various meats, including processed meat, as a convincing cause of colorectal cancer, their highest level of evidence, confirmed as a carcinogen by the World Health Organization more recently. Effectively meeting beyond a reasonable doubt. The main message was that the best prevention of colorectal cancer is the combination of higher physical activity with a fiber-rich and meat product poor diet. A decrease in half a turkey sandwich worth might lower the total number of colorectal cancer cases by approximately 20%. There are several implications of this cancer guideline update, but this paper in the industry publication Meat Science decided to focus on the consumer side of the story, since in their eyes, every consumer is a patient and vice versa at some point in the future. But chronic disease need not be invariably a consequence of aging. Although the evidence for the relationship between colorectal cancer risk, at least in the processed meat intake, cannot be denied, they suggest further research. For example, let's compare the risk of consuming meat to other risky practices: alcohol, lack of physical activity, obesity, smoking. Compared to lung cancer and smoking, maybe meat wouldn't look so bad. But consumers probably won't even hear about the cancer prevention guidelines. Consumers today overloaded with information. It's thus probable that the dissemination of the update on colorectal cancer drowns out in the information cloud. And even if the consumers do see it, the meat industry doesn't think they'll much care. For consumers in the Western world, the role of healthfulness, although important, is not close to taste satisfaction in shaping their final choice of meat and meat products. It's hence questionable that the revised recommendations based on the carcinogenic effects of meat consumption will yield substantial changes in consumer behavior. And doctors and nutrition professionals feed into this patronizing attitude that people don't care enough about their health to change. This classic paper from a leading nutrition journal scoffed at the idea that people would ever switch to a prudent diet, reducing their intakes of animal protein and fat, no matter how much cancer was prevented. The chances of reducing consumption of fat protein foods, or indeed any food, to a significant effect to avoid colon cancer, virtually nil. Consider heart disease. Look, we know we can prevent and treat heart disease with the same kind of diet, but the public won't do it. The diet, they say, would lose too much of its palatability. The great palatability of ham, in other words, largely outweighs other considerations. Although health and well-being are increasingly important factors in consumer decisions, this 1998 Meat Science article feared that unless meat eating becomes compatible with eating that is healthy and wholesome, it would be consigned to a minor role in the diet in developed countries during the next decade. Their prediction didn't quite pan out. Here's meat consumption per person over the last 30 years. Rising. 1998, when the Meat Science article was published, worrying about the next decade of meat consumption, which rose even further, but then did seem to kind of flatten out before it started falling off a cliff. Meat consumption down about 10% in recent years. Millions of Americans cutting down on meat. So don't tell me people aren't willing to change their diets, yet we continue to get diluted guidelines and dietary recommendations because authorities are asking themselves what dietary changes could be acceptable to the public, rather than just telling us what the best available science says and letting us make up our own minds about the cancer risk while feeding ourselves and our families.
That's the next one here.
After Dr. Dean Ornish conquered our number one killer, he moved on to killer number two. What happens if you put cancer on a plant-based diet? Ornish and colleagues found that the progression of prostate cancer could be reversed with a plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors, and no wonder. If you dip the blood of those eating a standard American diet onto cancer cells growing in a petri dish, cancer growth is cut down about 9%. Put people on a plant-based diet for a year, though, and their blood can do this. the blood circulating within the bodies of those eating plant-based had nearly 8 times the stopping power when it came to cancer cell growth. Now, this was for prostate cancer, the leading cancer killer specific to men. In women, it's breast cancer, the #1 cancer killer of young women. So researchers wanted to repeat the study with women using breast cancer cells instead, but they didn't want to wait a whole year to get the results. Women are dying now. So they figured, well, let's see what a plant-based diet can do after just 2 weeks against 3 different types of human breast cancer. Cancer growth started out powering away at 100% and then dropped after eating a plant-based diet for 14 days. Here's the before picture. A layer of breast cancer cells is laid down in a petri dish, and then blood from women eating the standard American diet is dripped on them. And as you can see, even the blood of women eating pretty poor diets has some ability to break down cancer. But after just 2 weeks eating healthy, blood was drawn from those same women. So they acted as their own control. Same women, 2 weeks later, their blood dripped on a new carpet of breast cancer cells. And this is all that's left. Just a few individual cancer cells remain. Their bodies cleaned up. Before and after, just 2 weeks eating healthy, their bloodstream became that much more hostile to cancer. Slowing down the growth of cancer cells. It's nice. Getting rid of them is even better. This is what's called apoptosis, programmed cell death. After eating healthy, their own bodies were able to somehow reprogram the cancer cells, forcing them into early retirement. This is what's called tunnel imaging, measuring DNA fragmentation, cell death. So dying cancer cells show up as little white spots. So again, this is the before, what the blood of your average woman can do to breast cancer cells. So you can knock off a few. You can see one dying cancer cell there in the upper left. But then after 14 days of healthy plant-based living, her blood can do this. It's like you're an entirely different person inside. The same blood now coursing through these women's bodies gained the power to significantly slow down and stop breast cancer cell growth after just 2 weeks eating a plant-based diet. What kind of blood do we want in our body? What kind of immune system? Do we want blood that just kind of rolls over when new cancer cells pop up? Or do we want blood circulating to every nook and cranny in our body with the power to slow down and stop it? Now, this dramatic strengthening of cancer defenses is after 14 days of a plant-based diet and exercise. They had these women out walking 30 to 60 minutes a day. Well, if you do 2 things, how do you know what role the diet played? So researchers decided to put it to the test. This is measuring cancer cell clearance, is what we saw before. The effect of blood taken from those who ate a plant-based diet, in this case for an average of 14 years, along with mild exercise, just like out walking every day. Plant-based diet and walking, that's the kind of cancer cell clearance you get. Compare that to the cancer-stopping power of your average sedentary American, which is basically non-existent. This middle group, though, instead of 14 years on a plant-based diet, 14 years standard American diet, but 14 years of daily, strenuous, hour-long exercise like calisthenics. The researchers want to know, if you exercise hard enough, if you exercise long enough, can you rival some strolling plant eaters over there? And the answer is exercise helps, no question. But literally 5,000 hours in the gym is no match for a plant-based diet. Same tunnel imaging as before. Even if you're a couch potato, eating fried potatoes, your body's not totally defenseless. Your bloodstream can kill off a few cancer cells. But exercise for 5,000 hours, you can kill cancer cells left and right. But nothing appears to kick more cancer tush than a plant-based diet. We think it's because of animal proteins, meat, egg white, and dairy proteins, increasing the level of IGF-1 in our bodies, insulin-like growth factor 1, a cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in the acquisition and progression of malignant tumors. Here's the experiment that really nailed IGF-1 as the villain. The same as last time, go on a plant-based diet, cancer cell growth drops, cancer cell death shoots up. But then here's the kicker. What if you add back to the cancer just the amount of IGF-1 banished from your body because you started eating healthier? It effectively erases the diet and exercise effect. It's like you never started eating healthy at all. So the reason one of the largest prospective studies on diet and cancer found the incidence of all cancers combined was lower among those eating more plant-based, maybe because they're eating less animal protein, less meat, egg white, and dairy protein, so end up with less IGF-1, which means less cancer growth. How much less cancer? Middle-aged men and women with high protein intakes had a 75% increase in overall mortality and a fourfold increase in the risk of dying specifically from cancer. But not all proteins, specifically animal protein, which makes sense given the higher IGF-1 level. The academic institution sent out a press release with a memorable opening line: "That chicken wing you're eating could be as deadly as a cigarette," explaining that eating a diet rich in animal proteins during middle age makes you 4 times more likely to die from cancer, a mortality risk factor comparable to smoking cigarettes. What was the response to the revelation that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to health as smoking? Well, one nutrition scientist replied that it was potentially dangerous to compare the effects of smoking with the effects of meat and dairy. Why? Because the smoker might think, why bother quitting smoking if my ham and cheese sandwich is just as bad for him? So better not tell anyone about the whole animal protein thing. It reminds me of a famous Philip Morris cigarette ad that tried to downplay the risk by saying, hey, you think secondhand smoke is bad, increasing the risk of lung cancer 19%. Well, hey, drinking 1 or 2 glasses of milk every day, maybe 3 times as bad, 62% higher risk of lung cancer, or doubling your risk frequently cooking with oil, or tripling your risk of heart disease by eating non-vegetarian, or multiplying your risk 6-fold by eating lots of meat and dairy. So they conclude, let's keep some perspective here. The risk of lung cancer from secondhand smoke may be well below that of other everyday activities. So breathe deep. It's like saying, hey, don't worry about getting stabbed because getting shot is so much worse. How about neither? 2 risks don't make a right. Of course, you know, Philip Morris stopped throwing dairy under the bus once they purchased Kraft Foods. Just saying.
Love Dr. Greger.
Yeah.
We'll briefly talk about the G-bombs here, and then next week, Charlie's videos and stuff, he'll talk a lot more about these things. But so this is actually from Dr. Joel Furman from Eat to Live. He has, these are the kind of what the science, the summary of the science shows, especially for fighting cancer, is this mnemonic, G-bombs, G-B-O-M-B-S. So G stands for greens and garlic. It's like leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, especially broccoli. And then beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. And so the more of these foods you can integrate into your diet, for any reason, but especially these are the super foods for cancer. And I'll just pick out a few things. I like mushrooms, for example, contain something called aromatase inhibitors. And those are, there's actually really expensive cancer drugs, you know, it costs thousands and thousands of dollars, are aromatase inhibitors. And where they got the idea for aromatase inhibitors is from mushrooms, because mushrooms contain aromatase inhibitors. So they actually inhibit cancer growth. And then, you know, berries, all these foods have lots of antioxidants, which are good. They also have anti-angiogenesis factors. So that's what we talked about, growing a blood supply to the cancerous tumor. These things fight against those things. And then, yeah, we'll go into way more detail on these things, but just wanted you to have a time to jot this down or take a snapshot of the screen if you want for the G-bombs. I don't know if you have anything to add specifically to these, Charlie.
No, I think you covered it quite well. And someone asked, Renee, where are the beets?
Yeah.
So
yeah, root vegetables. So beets are high in nitrates, so they're really good for lowering blood pressure and a very healthy food. But I don't know about what if they have any specific cancer fighting properties, but imagine they do. But yeah, beets are known for having lots of nitrates, which dilate the blood vessels, keep your blood flowing smoothly. You'll hear a lot of athletes are doing, they actually have good studies that show people that when they take beets before a race, they actually run faster, they have better blood flow their muscles, and so a lot of high performance athletes are into eating beets right before competition.
So the beet greens would go along with the greens and garlic up at the top. And the beets themselves, like Scott said, are great for performance and also for healing your arteries with the nitric oxide. Any others? Questions?
I'll leave that up there, or I can unshare my screen if you guys don't need to see it anymore.
I have a question.
Yeah, I don't see who it is, but fire
Oh.
away.
I don't know how to show who I am, but I'm Delilah.
Okay, Delilah.
Is there any data on the like rabbit cancer, so to speak, like the really aggressive or genetic forms of cancer and like anti-angiogenic properties or lifestyle in general? Like, I'm sure they help marginally, but can they actually prevent something like that, something really aggressive and genetic?
You know, what we have to really look at is more population studies, which are, you know, not as high of level of evidence. We don't have like randomized controlled trials and things like that. But if you look at population studies, and you can, if you read the China study, you'll see it a lot. But you can also look to the blue zones. So the blue zones, the 5 places on Earth that have the healthiest, longest lived populations, or even in places like rural Africa. So here, since we're talking about cancer specifically, I'll refer to rural Africa. So if you go to rural Africa, and especially, you know, 20, 30 years ago, the rate of colon cancer in rural Africa 20 or 30 years ago was almost zero. I mean, it was rare to ever find any native African with colon cancer. And you know, when you look at their diet, they're eating predominantly plant-based diet. They're not vegan, they're eating some meat, but it's very, very small, eating lots of roots and tubers and vegetables and grains. And so that's what their diet was predominantly consisted of. But then you come and look at the Africans in the United States, their rates of colon cancer are really high, some of the highest in the world. And so, and they're genetically the same. And so we know it's the diet, it's the lifestyle, it's the diet that they're eating. So, and then again, if you go back to the blue zones, they have very, very low rates of cancer in the blue zones, and they're eating 90 to 95% plant-based diets. And so you can look at that. I mean, you know, they've been eating that way their entire lives. Whereas, you know, if you already have an aggressive cancer, you know, we don't really have data to say you could reverse that or put it in, cure it, or put it in remission with the diet and lifestyle. But there are cases where this has happened. Of course, they always say, well, was it spontaneous remission or was it the diet and lifestyle change? We don't always know, especially for the aggressive cancers. But all I can say with the data that we have is, you know, do the diet and lifestyle, but, you know, do the traditional treatment as well. But as an adjunct, do the diet and lifestyle, because it can't hurt. It can only help, and why not, right?
Thank you.
Marcia and then Kevin.
Oh, okay. I have more or less a comment. I don't know if you can see my shirt or not, but my daughter-in-law's sister has cancer, and today she went through her last radiation, but she's still continuing with chemo. That sound about right?
Yeah, usually it means when they think it's spread, and is usually when they go to chemo.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, alrighty.
I usually encourage people who are having a recurrence of a cancer to think about doing a totally whole food, plant-based lifestyle to reduce the IGF-1 and whatever other inflammatory risk factors are being promoted. And it's a difficult sell because people are kind of used to eating what they're used to, but that's why we're having these classes to encourage people to do this before they develop the cancer.
Right. I know she said, I was told she said they were changing the lifestyle, but I don't know what that means for sure.
Yeah, so there are definitely differences on how people are counseled about their lifestyle. And unfortunately, most of the lifestyle counseling is not promoting a totally whole food, plant-based lifestyle. It's sort of like, well, eat chicken with the skin off instead of steak, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It is somewhat encouraging though. I mean, I've heard secondhand through multiple patients over the last few years that the dietitians at the Willamette Valley Cancer Institute here in town, they do recommend a more plant-centered diet to their cancer patients. So they have looked at the science a bit, and they do. That is encouraging. But yeah, we would say be better. I think the science is strong enough that we could go all in on it. And I think it kind of goes back to what Dr. Greger was saying earlier, is that a little bit of a patronizing attitude that, well, we got to tell people to do what's reasonable instead of just telling people what the science says and let them make the decision. We just say, well, let's water it down a little bit, and so more people will likely do it if we water it down a little bit. So that's that kind of mentality. But Charlie and I feel like that's patronizing, and we feel like you guys, everyone we come across, deserves to know. Just tell us what the science says, and you can decide to change one thing, not just give somebody a watered down version of it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to mute you right now, Marcia, and then Kevin, and then Arun.
Maybe Ron wants to go first.
Arun, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Quick question. You didn't mention things that I have heard, people use for cancer prevention or cure. Things like turmeric or ginger or like wheatgrass juice, sprouts, things of that nature. Do you have any comments on that?
That's next week.
Oh, okay.
It's to be continued.
All right. Thank you. I rest my case.
We will get into that for sure. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, Tona, and then Kevin.
So this is my second time attending your class. I was originally diagnosed with fallopian cancer back in October of 21 and had a pretty large tumor at that point. It was larger than what they were talking about, like 12 by 14 by 20 or something, like pretty big. Had surgery, all of that was removed, went through chemo, was considered in remission in February of 22, and then celebrated 1 year, and then cancer just returned. I found out at the end of June. So there's a little small tumor that was found on my liver, and so I'm back in chemotherapy and working through that. And I have been like slowly working towards the whole-based diet and definitely moving towards it. Like I really don't do a lot of animal-based foods, but what I'm finding is hard is like I need help with the recipes. I need help with like what am I bringing? Like, and I've asked the folks at the cancer center, and I have found them actually to be really unhelpful in this process.
Yes.
And yeah, so like I guess that for me is something that would be helpful. Like, and maybe it would be reaching out to, I forget her name, Liz, maybe.
So you could reach out to Lisa Chick. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to spend time with you. You could talk with Kevin Rogers about this also. So just send a note. I don't know if Lisa put her information in, but if
are you on the class newsletter?
I am.
Okay, good. And then you can also if you've checked out the website and go to the class archives, and back in January, after my introduction and Charlie's introduction, we had 2 classes on meal preparation and planning, and you could watch the recording of those. Those might be helpful as well.
Okay, cool.
And whatever help you need, Lisa will be happy to spend time with you. If something gets in the way with her activities, she'll let me know, and I can kind of have someone else, either myself or someone else, spend some time with you to kind of keep encouraging you on this track. And again, you heard my thoughts about what I encourage people to do if they have a recurrence. It's to do this like I do it completely. It's like, it's not a thought about I'm transitioning or I'm doing this mostly. I am doing this is what it is. It's been that way for me for 11 years now. I did this for my wife's sake because of her strong heart history. I didn't do it for myself, but I'm glad that I did it for her because it's really helped me. And so we will help you without being policemen about this or giving tickets. No judgment here, but to continue to encourage you because of the benefits that you potentially could receive.
I want to get there.
Okay, well, keep up the hope and we can share some other videos with you. I think we'll be doing that next week a little bit also, so come next week too.
I plan on being here.
Okay, Tona. Okay,
And Tona, just make sure you look in the chat because Lisa sent her email to you in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Kevin.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. I just had one clarification, Scott. I think we're probably on the same page with, but sometimes the wording comes out. And I'm curious, we're not seeing cancer as something that we're fighting against that's an attack from the outside, but more so as cancer is something that doesn't really attack, but evolves. The cells and the cancer tissues are modifications of our own cells and tissues. It's clarifying because I think sometimes the perception is that we're fighting against something, some pathogen, and so I guess the mainstream medical model is to, essentially use poisons and things that would otherwise be considered dangerous and toxic as a way of trying to shock the system or get it out. And now we're trying some new things, modifying the immune system. But really, we developed cancer and it got out of control because of improper, whether through our own knowledge or not, improper substances, forces, conditions that were under, the body's under. So it couldn't keep up with removal.
Right. So there's carcinogens, there's viruses that can trigger cancer. And another kind of holistic way I've heard cancer described by a cancer doctor, actually. He actually worked in oncology and hospice. And he talks about it as, basically because of the carcinogen or the virus that triggered the cancer, the cancer cells have become isolated. So instead of, kind of like Dr. McDougall said, it replicates at its own free will. It doesn't follow the rules. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is those cancer cells have lost their identity. They're isolated. They're no longer a pancreas cell or a colon cell or a liver cell or a lung cell or a brain cell. Where the cancer is, they're isolated and it doesn't know what to do, and so it just starts replicating. Its DNA has been changed, and now it's just replicating, and it's taking over. It's only doing what it knows how to do, is replicate, and so it's no longer neighborly. It's no longer part of the human body anymore. It's now just it's lost its way. I mean, that's another kind of holistic way to look at it. But yeah, everything that we're trying to do in traditional medical care is to try to kill the cancer cell or try to enhance our immune system to get rid of it, to make it go back to what it was before, make it go back to a pancreatic cell or whatever. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know, but that's kind of another way to look at it.
Thank you for the clarification.
So Tona, your hand is still up. I don't know, maybe you just didn't bring it down or you have another question before you go.
I didn't put it down. I apologize.
Not a problem. No, it's common. We're good with it. Scott, thank you so much. That, you hit a number of points. Next week, we're going to be watching a few more videos. We're going to see some therapies. One video that I have in mind is a person who was diagnosed with a terminal cancer who changed his diet and how it helped him. And we are maybe talk about some of the other people that we've had experience with, and then some other videos. So we're going to have fun with you next week, sharing some more education and seeing if we can ease your mind a little bit as we continue to encourage you on the path of healthy lifestyle choices, truly healthy lifestyle choices, particularly your food choices. Boy, this was fun tonight.
I think so, everyone.
I have a question. Which
Yes,
kind,
Trouty.
which kind of mushrooms is inhibiting the cancer growth? Which-
Any of them, any of the mushrooms work. And actually in the studies, most of the studies that were done on mushrooms were just the simple white button mushroom, just the cheap.
The white one?
Yeah, just the typical white button mushrooms that you find in the store all the time. But I think
Yeah.
any of the mushrooms have the aromatase inhibitors in them, so it doesn't really matter which, eat whatever one you like.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, portobellos are fine, which are the brown ones, like that
Yeah,
look like the
I
white ones. Those are fine. You don't have to buy the really expensive oyster mushrooms and chantel or whatever, chanterelle. I don't know my mushrooms very well, although I eat one every single day.
And does it
Champagne is
matter?
very expensive.
Does it matter whether you cook them or not?
You
Or
know,
eat-
Dr. Greger recommends cooking them, probably steaming them or lightly cooking them. And I know that we've eaten raw mushrooms throughout the years from the salad bars and those sorts of things, but he recommends
Okay.
doing slight cooking.
Yeah, I think even 30 seconds in the microwave kills. There is a mild toxin on raw mushrooms that can be problematic, but even just like 30 seconds in a microwave or lightly steaming them, that kills the toxin.
Mhm. Okay.
This has been great.
All
Look
right.
forward to next week. And again, thank you very much, Scott, and thanks for everybody who's come for tonight. We had, I think, 39 people at one time, so class is starting to expand again. It's breathing out.
All right, have a good night.
So much.
Right.
Good night.
See you next week.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
Lisa.